Hey everyone, my name is Penny Zanker, and it's time to reset. This podcast goes beyond just navigating change. It's about new ways of thinking about how you can approach challenges, how you can shift your mindset when needed, create some space and grace for yourself so that you can rethink, recharge, and reprioritize when and where needed. Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Thank you for hitting play and sharing this next episode with me. It's time to reset. Welcome to Time to Reset. I try on this show to bring in people that are going to help you to think differently, to look at things in a new way. And, I think we got one here. I think we've got a fish that's going to really teach us a new way of thinking. And his name is Jacob D. Chase. And he is a former Wall Street investment banker and hedge fund analyst turned entrepreneur and founder of The Infant. After bootstrapping and exiting a multi-million-dollar real estate business, he set out to solve a problem that he saw across every industry, that companies rigorously measure financial capital, but they struggle to measure the true value of human talent. And that is such a current topic right now, with people delivering high value with their knowledge and ability to solve problems with AI, and people who are feeling like maybe they are not getting compensated even though they are junior to the organization. So I'm excited to have this conversation because today Jacob is building the technology that ties that individual contribution directly to business performance. And this has been a gap, I would say, in the marketplace. And he helps organizations to strengthen cultural integrity, improve capital allocation, and rethink what modern meritocracy looks like. So without further ado, Jacob, welcome to the show.
Great. Thank you, Penny. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so glad you tackled this challenge. Like, why this challenge specifically? What people have passions when they build a company, right? So where did this come from?
It came from when I was the real estate business. And so, me and a partner had bootstrapped kind of a diversified real estate services firm, very traditional business lines. But we were growing the team, and we had 150 people. And somewhere along the way, I really kind of lost visibility. I didn't know everybody personally. I wasn't able to kind of see everyone's contribution. And those were important things to understand, like where are your top performers really making a difference? And, how do you attract and retain more of those folks? There was a very specific kind of person in my organization. It was an accounts payable specialist. And, the job market said he was worth $55,000 a year. But he was a total rock star, an outperformer across the board, really had all of the right intangibles, was, a huge cultural flag bearer of all the kind of the ethos of how we wanted to operate, way above and beyond his job description, everything done with a smile, lots of people depending on him for all sorts of tasks. And I knew he was underpaid. But what I wanted to understand was, what is the right way to evaluate his contribution and understand kind of within the constraints of the business, what is his share of the overall pie? That was just a fascinating problem for me to tackle. And it's one that's really kind of carried me for the last 5 years or so in really exploring all of the things that we've kind of got a challenge of the status quo in order to enable kind of a system that I think gives you some really good answers to those type of questions.
It's really interesting. As I said kind of in the introduction, is that I think we're in a time where we do have to look at compensation differently. If somebody could be adding huge value and they're 1 to 2 years out of school, and someone else who's been in the organization for 10 years, I'm not saying that there isn't something to seniority or experience, but each needs to be measured, right? And just because someone's out of school and the typical salary is whatever you said, 55,000, that there are people who'll be like, well, I'm worth more than that. And your best people will leave because they're not getting compensated fairly.
Absolutely. I mean, with all of this AI enablement and all of this new kind of technology that helps augment individual performance, it's like people's contribution is really stratifying. Like your top performers are able to contribute more and more than they used to be. And so like the distance between them and average is only growing. And
Yeah.
how do we kind of capture and measure those type of things, is a really important question. It's only growing in importance kind of given the environment we're in.
So how do you do that? Like measuring human capital. So how do you measure somebody's contribution to culture? Like,
Sure.
and how that affects the bottom line. I think that's the $1 million question, right? Everybody is saying we want to build this amazing culture, and they talk about behaviors that they're looking to see, but how do you measure that?
Yeah, well, look, so the first 10 years of my career was on Wall Street, right? And so I'm still kind of a finance guy at my core and really believe a lot in some of the mechanisms and institutions that have been around for a long time and have really kind of proven their worth in an unchanged way. And the core one is the stock market, where in the stock market, you are aggregating a multitude of diverse perspectives. You have your day traders and your short sellers and your value investors and your quants, and everybody has different ideas of what's valuable. And
Right.
no one perspective is necessarily right. But in aggregate, you end up with a price and you have a single point of value that, kind of measures the collective judgment at any given moment. And,
Of a stock, you
ultimately
mean, right?
of for stock.
So you're saying how the
Exactly.
stock goes up and down. Okay.
100%.
Tracking.
So the way that we started to tackle that problem, right, is one of the kind of the core assumptions that I had to challenge as a leader of that organization was that my perspective was right. And that, realizing that I had one perspective, but everyone else has perspectives too of who's contributing, what's important, what
Right.
matters. And ultimately, you need to aggregate all of those perspectives in order to establish that price, that value, that measurement of contribution. And in doing that, you get some really interesting answers that, as people, especially as executives, you don't always get to see.
Like what?
So, a traditional talent assessment is a very centralized system where someone establishes the criteria that you're evaluating on. It's these 10 topics, and
Hmm.
here's the scale that rated on a 1 to 10.
Right.
And that creates, a few different distortions. Like the first one is that you can't capture everything that matters in that type of information gathering because there's lots of things that don't make the list that are really important in human interaction and the intangibles that aren't always measurable. That also creates a political incentive where like these are the things that I need to self promote accordingly for and maybe hold down some competition in making myself look good as I try to go up the career ladder. But what we realized, in that last organization was that everyone has a different perspective. And if not everyone's right, we all care about different things. So as a leader of the organization, I cared about business performance, right? The people who were delivering business results was very important to me. But we had new people joining the team who were fresh out of college. And the things that were important to them were a boss that helps them learn, that, colleagues that help them get integrated into the organization and learn and figure out the ropes of how to navigate the established practices and systems. And those type of things were valuable to them, but they're never going to show up in a kind of a centralized assessment system. Now, what's important is that, not everybody's vote counts the same. In aggregating everyone's perspectives, instead of kind of picking the categories and building up to a judgment of value, you're then able to kind of establish a value and then deconstruct in all of the categories that are contributing to developing that.
Okay, well, hold on. I got to clarify a couple things so that I understand this. So, I mean, it makes sense to me that, and maybe that's where you're challenging this perspective that the central organization, whether it's HR or senior management, they meet and they say, these are our values, these are the behaviors that we're going to measure, and these are the 10 things that we're going to rate on a scale from 1 to 10. Now, you can still rate immeasurable behavior on a scale from 1 to 10. We could still say somebody's attitude on a scale from 1 to 10. And of course, it's a little subjective, but once you do it, you have a baseline, right? So
Mhm.
I get that. So are you saying that everyone in the organization can say these are the things that are important in our organization that deliver value, and then somehow you take all of those little things, you put them in sort of a model, and it comes out and says, this is what our values are based on what everybody says is important, or not just values, the value of our work.
It's a little bit different. Let me separate these things. So,
Okay.
a lot of times culture and the things that are prized in the organization, especially from kind of the cultural documents and things like that, those are set by leadership and those are important and that's what they want to reinforce. And those aren't
Right.
necessarily decentralized or distributed. But
Okay.
measuring contribution is ultimately was kind of the answer that we were seeking.
Okay, so
And
it's the contribution piece, and
yes,
everybody has an input there. So
correct.
is it saying, here's the ultimate sales number that we need to have in order to meet our goals as one criteria, and everybody says, this is what's valuable to meet that goal? Or how do you get aligned on what you're working towards?
Well, so every team's different, right? And so it depends on the organization and it depends on what seat you're in within that organization. And ultimately, what each person is contributing to the collective intelligence is their perspective of who is contributing. And that contribution can be a lot of different things, right? For our accounts payable guy, it was vendor management, it was cultural events, it was all sorts of different things. But in the sales team, it could be, well, who's helping me learn my pitch better? Who's helping me kind of navigate these potential blockers in the sales process? That could be everywhere across the organization. When each person is kind of identifying with everyone they work with, who is contributing in kind of a forced ranked manner.
Gotcha.
You then can aggregate all of that data for kind of the ultimate result, which is a proportionate share of contribution. And if you have a team of 150, and ultimately the output is, well, I know this person is 1%, and this person is 3%, and this person is 0.75% of the aggregate value that's being produced by that entire group, you can then link that to the business results of the organization. It's like, all right, well, as an organization, the business is producing X, and I know each person's proportionate share of X, and therefore kind of how they are valued by the work that is happening within the organization.
That's an interesting approach. So what I'm hearing you say, because you're having, so it's like a 360 feedback, if you want to call it. So people are giving feedback. They're saying that Penny is amazing at this, and she's done this for me. And so someone else says Penny, and everybody's saying Penny, right? And so then I show up as a higher percentage on the overall for that team. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the way to liken, the way that we do it is a real-time 360 review for everyone.
Uh-huh.
And again, what we're not doing is saying, well, Penny is very reliable and Penny is a high contributor to our team in order to establish value. What we are doing is we are establishing value and then deconstructing it into that from that feedback of what's working well and what's working not.
Right.
And so, each person identifies kind of their proportionate share of contribution from what they see. And there's some math that aggregates that for the entire organization. And so each person is kind of giving feedback on who they are working with, and you can get some real system level intelligence from that.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And I think that it should work from establish what's valuable and then have people be focusing on what's valuable, right? We all want to show up and do meaningful, valuable work. So, what would be really good is if you could also identify in your system how people could avoid the busy work and the things that get in the way of the valuable work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the
Probably you could take that same system as it's talking about measuring people and what they're doing well, right? And talk about what's in the way for all of these people so that you could aggregate and find out for the at a company level what they need to stop doing and rethink.
Yeah, to that point, another way to kind of think about the way that value gets distributed in this system is kind of like a dependency analysis. Who is depending on who to kind of process the work of the organization.
Right.
And if the things that you are doing is not dependent on by anybody for what they're doing, it
Mm,
can probably go away. And the things
gotcha.
that
That's
keep
so that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
and the things that are heavily dependent on and people need more of, you can find ways to do that more efficiently and augment that.
Right.
And that can all be gathered just via the inputs and observations of the participants in the organization.
So are there some specific questions that I'm trying to think of? So, you have a system that delivers this and everything. If somebody wanted to apply this type of thinking in just a real simple manual way, and I know that it doesn't do it justice, you need the engine to do the math and everything. But if I would just take a super simplistic way, what that might that look like? Like if I have a 5-person organization, right?
Well, I mean, I think it looks like a traditional 360 review where everyone fills out a massive survey on everyone else, and you get some good intel from that. But the burden and lift to do that is pretty prohibitive for most organizations on a frequent basis.
Right.
But that type of information, especially when each person is allowed to kind of drive their input a little bit about what they see and about what matters, and what's working and what's not, is a similar type of information that we're gathering through our platform in a really low touch and automated way.
So we're running out of time. So before we close out, so are you seeing, and is this what you did for your organization where you were able to change someone's compensation by being able to show, let's say, to higher ups or whomever, or to the person that they're delivering this level of value, and so we want to give you more compensation. Like, how do you work the compensation piece so you don't piss everybody else off, right? That people understand why they're getting more and how they fall into this. And how do
Yeah.
you avoid that political, because then there's got to still be some political aspects to that of how they're treating each other.
Well, one of the things that I think we've found, and I think is more conventional wisdom, is that people tend not to be envious of people who deserve what they have.
Hmm, that's a good point.
And there's a lot of, I think, validation in crowdsourcing everybody's opinion about performance. And people believe it. And it's a lot more credible than just my boss going to bat for me
Sure.
to try to increase the bonus pool for my team. Like that's what the real political incentive, I think, drives. But when it's a collective assessment and everyone kind of acknowledges that like their result is based on not from any authority, but from the collective judgment of anybody, of everybody, there's validity to it and people get what they deserve. And our experience is that people may not like initially where they show up in some of the outputs, but they find it valid and they're very motivated to change it because instead of
And they can look
decentralized,
at it as feedback, and because it's not one person's opinion, it's a collective.
exactly. And in a political system, you get value by playing the game. But in a distributed system, you get value by being valuable to the people you work with. And it changes the dynamic of kind of team accountability instantly and really kind of raises a lot of the intrinsic motivation for contribution across the teams that we're seeing.
That's cool. I like the way you put that in the last few sentences there about the distributed system. So we'll leave it there. That sounds perfect. Unless there's something that I didn't ask that you
Mhm.
feel like is really important to share as part of this talk.
The last thing that I would just emphasize is that what we're ultimately trying to do is to determine the size of each slice for each person, right? But it's the business performance, it's the company performance that determines the size of the pie. And therefore, that's where you get the linkage between the individual performance and the overall outcome. And when you start putting dollars and cents to it in a credible way, in a way that allows you to measure the intangibles that matter to people while providing the right incentives for them to continue growing their contribution, it unlocks a lot of magic that's, I think, latent in a lot of the incumbent systems today.
That's awesome. So where can people find out more information about you and your system and this way of thinking?
Yeah, our website is www.theinfin.com, like infinity but shortened. My email is jacob@theinfin.com, and I'm active on LinkedIn at /Jacob D. Chase. And I would still love to talk with anyone personally who cares to learn more.
Amazing. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Penny. This is fun.
And thank you all for being here. What did you take away? What are you thinking about a little differently? Like if you're compensating your people, you're responsible for the feedback and how you're working with your team. I think there's some good insights here for us to step back, as I would say, the reset practice, to step back, get some perspective and realign. So get some perspective on new ways of looking at how we collect and distribute feedback as a team so that we can really measure the value of what people are delivering and also increase the value that you're providing to your team members as well as to your customers. So, because at the end of the day, it's all about serving your people, serving your customer, and that comes down to the value you're adding. So, thank you all for being here. I'd love to hear from you. Pop Jacob a note, pop me a note. Let me know what you're taking away. Let me know what other topics you want to hear about and talk about, because I would love to find people that are a good fit for those topics. Anyway, everybody, thank you. My name is Penny Zenker, and it's time to reset. See you next time. Hey, thank you for spending this time with me. It really means a lot. If you're feeling a little off, distracted, overwhelmed, stuck, or just out of sync, remember that's your signal to reset. And that's all it takes, just recognizing one reset moment at a time. So stay tuned for more tips, tools, tricks, stories, strategies, all here on Time to Reset. We'll see you in the next episode.